ॐ दक्षिणस्य समारम्भा शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमा अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताः स्मर्या गुरुपरम्परा श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। परिज्ञानाश्रम श्रीगुरुशङ्कर परिज्ञानाश्रम शङ्कर सद्गुरु केशववामन कृष्ण पाण्डुरङ्ग आनन्द परिज्ञान गुरु सद्यो जात शङ्कर सद्गुरु गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैः स्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्ददातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। So now the Kaivalya Upanishad is talking about Nididhyasanam. And what is that Nididhyasanam that I am supposed to do? That is concentrating or contemplating upon my real nature, the Swarupam of me, the Atma, which is nothing but the Swarupam of Brahman itself. So Brahma Swarupam or Atma Swarupam is that on which one is supposed to contemplate upon. And that Brahma Swarupam is without any upadhis. And that is the Nirguna Brahma, Nididhyasanam or contemplation. That Aham Purnasmi, Aham Nityosmi, Aham Shantosmi. Whatever is that which is giving me a sense of limitation because of my identification with the body mind sense complex, I take up that particular Vedanta Vakya which describes my reality, my real nature. When I feel a Purna, then I contemplate upon Purnosmi, Aham Purnosmi. Like that, I have discussed in great detail about how the Nididhyasanam is done and what is the very purpose of Nididhyasanam. To get rid of the Viparita Bhavanas, to get rid of the Viparyas. And this text, Kaivalya Upanishad, is talking about Nididhyasanam first. But then we also saw that those who are not yet ready to contemplate upon that Brahman, Nirguna Brahman means what? Without any attributes. That I can see myself as that attributeless Brahman. For this, a lot of preparation of the mind is necessary. And in spite of adequate Shravanam and Mananam, if I am not well prepared for this knowledge, there is a possibility that I may not be able to contemplate upon this attributeless Brahman as myself. Aham Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta Atma Asmi. Or Brahman is Sat Chit Ananda Rupa Atma. Or Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma Iti, if I am not able to contemplate upon the nature, the Swarupam of Brahman, Atma Brahman, then the Upanishad itself in the 7th verse said that for such people who are not yet ready to contemplate upon the attributeless, imperishable, sarvagatam, susukshmam Brahma, then we have to come down to one level and start seeing the whole universe as nothing but the manifestation of Ishvara. We see the whole universe as the manifestation of that Brahman and visualize the whole Jagat to be that very body of the Lord, like we saw in Ashtamurti Upasana, which I discussed in the last session itself. And here in the 7th verse, the Upanishad talked about Shiva, the form of Lord Shiva, as the very Vishwarupa Shiva, where he said that Uma Sahayam, that Shiva which is inseparably associated with the Shakti. Uma is the Shakti associated. And Uma Sahita Shiva is the Abhinna Nimitta Karanam of Nimitta Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karanam of this entire universe. The material cause, Uma being the very Prakriti, being the very material cause, and Shiva being the very intelligent cause of this universe. So, Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karanam of this entire universe, Uma Sahayam, Parameshwaram, this Parameshwara or Ishvara or Brahman manifesting in a particular form, and the entire Jagat is to be considered as the very form of Ishvara. And Prabhum, we saw that this Shiva with Uma Sahayam Shiva is able to manifest itself as this entire world. Prabhavana Shilaha, that Shiva, which is who is able to manifest as the very Lord of this entire universe, Prabhu. That means what? Sashaktaha. This Shiva is Sashaktaha, capable par excellence of manifesting as the very form, name and form called as the Jagat, and explained Trilochanam, Neelakantham, Prashantam. So he said, take this as a upasana. Jagat Swarupa Ishvara Upasana or Vishwarupa Ishvara Upasana may you come down to. And as I already explained, in Bhagavad Gita, also in the 12th chapter, Bhagwan Krishna talks about even coming down one step further, seeing this Brahman from the window of my Ishta Devata. My Ishta Devata as that Ishvara who is the Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karanam of this entire universe. But here, the whole Prapancha, the Jagat, is explained as the very body of Lord Shiva, which is done in many Upanishads. We saw that in Mundaka Upanishad also. It comes in Chandogya Upanishad also, where the whole universe is the Virat Purusha, described as that very manifestation of Ishvara with the what is the head, where is the head, where are the eyes, what are the ears. You have to go back to Upanishad and Mandaka Upanishad and see what has been described in, Agni Murdhayasya, that particular, mantra talks about the manifestation of Jagat Swarupa or Vishwarupa Ishvara. And then he says, Dhyatva Munihi Gacchati Tamasaha Parasthar. And that very Jagat Swarupa or Vishwarupa Ishvara is nothing but this attributeless Nirguna Brahman. The very content of this Jagat is that Brahman. And what is the nature of that content of that Brahman? Prashantam, no changes. Samasta Sakshi, that which is a Sakshi manifesting through all the names and forms. And initially contemplating over this Brahman as the Vishwarupa Ishvara, and then seeing the very content of this Vishwam or this Jagat as that consciousness, then this Munihi, is able to see the very swarupam of this Ishvara as Prashantam Samasta Sakshim Shivam Dhyatva, having contemplated upon, Munihi Gachati. This Muni goes or acquires tamasaha parasta, means he goes beyond ignorance. And the same, the very swarupam of this Brahman was described in the very 8th chapter again. Sa Brahma, Sa Shivaha, Sa Indraha, Sa Aksharaha, Paramaha, Swarat, Sa Eva Vishnuhu, Sa Pranaha, Sa Kalaha, Sa Agnihi, Sa Chandrama. That very consciousness which I am seeing as the very Vishwarupa Ishvara, that very consciousness manifests as the originator Brahma, the Sthiti, the one who is the Sthiti Karaka in the form of Vishnu, the Laya Karaka in the form of Shiva. But what is that? What is that consciousness? Aksharaha, Naksharati, that which does not wane away or change. Paramaha Swarat, that which is the very light of consciousness which reveals itself. That because of which everything else is revealed. That is the light of consciousness because of which the sun shines, the moon shines, the stars shine, the Agni shines. Okay, so we saw that Natatra Suryo Bhati. And this very consciousness manifests as the very prana, as the kala, the time principle, as Agni, all the devatas, the functionaries, the natural functionaries of this universe, Chandrama, representing all the matter principle in the form of all the planets, galaxies, etc. So it is that consciousness, that Umasahayam Shiva, who manifests as this entire universe with all the functionaries. That's what we saw in the 8th verse also. In the 9th verse, we saw what is that consciousness? That which has no beginning, that which has no end, that which has nothing in the middle. That was what was talked about. Sa eva sarvam yad bhutam yad cha bhavyam sanatanam. That is sanatanam, that which does not disappear, that which is all the time there. Sanatanam, that which was in the past also, that which is the present also, that which is going to be the future also. There is absolutely no change. What appears is this universe, exists is this universe, resolves back into Atman or Brahman is this universe. It is this body which appears at a certain time, exists for a certain time, goes back, resolves back into the Panchabhutas. All the names and forms, all the matter principle appears in this consciousness, exists for some time, and then resolves back. Therefore, the space, the time, the Panchabhutas, the Panchabhautika Prapancha, and even all those functionaries like Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Indra, Agni, Varuna, Marutganas, Prana, everything is nothing but an upadhi through which this Atma manifests, this Brahman manifests. Please remember, Atma and Brahman, there is no difference. The existence, consciousness, Brahman, Atma. From the point of view of this individual Upadhi, the Sakshi Chaitanya, the Chaitanya which is Chaitanya Rupa Atma, it is called as Atma. But that which is the existence of the entire Jagat, that consciousness behind the entire Jagat with all its names and forms, it's called as Brahman. And therefore, what do we say? We say that Nyatva Tam, having known that as the very content consciousness of the Jiva, the Jagat, and Ishvara, a person who knows this, the one who contemplates upon seeing no difference between me, the Jiva, the Jagat, and Ishvara. The Bheda is only Upadhi Bheda. But the very content in every upadhi of the Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara is nothing but this particular Sanatanam consciousness, that which was, that which is, that which will ever be without undergoing change, any kind of a change. This is the knowledge. Mrityu matyeti. This knowledge frees me from this samsara. Nanya pantha vimuktaye. Mukti, or getting out of the cycles of birth and death, getting out of this bandhana or bondage of whatever I'm feeling, the upadhi induced bondage, the limitations that I feel because of this limited upadhi, the limitations that I feel because of the upadhi of the jagat, limited upadhi, names and forms. If I have to get out of it, there is no other go. Nanya panta vidyate ayanaya. It is also said in the Purusha Sukta, it is said that knowing this Purusha means this consciousness exactly the way it should be known. Neither it is he or she or it. It is the content consciousness, the light of consciousness behind every name and form and every upadhi. And I am that consciousness. I am that Brahman. I am that Atma. This understanding is the only one which releases me from the bondage of samsara. Na anyaha pantha vidyate ayana. There is no other path. There is no other way. Jnanattu yeva kaivalyam. All the other paths, it could be, Ashtanga Yoga, it could be Upasana, it could be Karma, it could be discipline, it could be tapas, anything. It is only going to give me the preparation of the intellect to absorb and assimilate this knowledge. By themselves, directly, none of them are going to give me this freedom from samsara, which we call as moksha. Moksha is not getting something or going somewhere. Moksha is understanding that I am that very Atma who's the Mukta Swarupa Atma. This understanding takes me out of my limitations. And this is freedom from samsara. And this is what is called as Na Anya Panta Vidyate Vimuktaye. Then the same Atman is described as Sarva Bhutantaratma. That consciousness is the Kshetrajnaha everywhere, in all the jivas, in all the kshetras. That consciousness is the Kshetrajnaha. One consciousness which is behind the millions of forms of living and non-living beings. That is what is called as the consciousness Atma Ahamasmi. I, this consciousness, experience this world through this body, mind, sense complex. I, the same consciousness, experience the world through all the other body, mind, sense complexes also. Therefore, I am the Kshetrajnaha. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu. I am that consciousness which becomes the karta, bhokta through different millions of upadhis. There are no different consciousnesses behind different upadhis, no. It is one consciousness behind all the millions of upadhis and millions of names and forms. That is what he says in the next verse, 10th verse, which we just started in the last section. So he says, Sarvabhutastamatmanam Sarvabhutani Chatmani Sampashyan Brahma Paramam Yati Nanyena Hetuna. So here, I also gave you a hint last time that in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the verse number 29, I think it's verse 28 or 29, I think it is one of those verses, where Lord Krishna says, Sarva Bhutastam Atmanam, Sarva Bhutani Chatmani, Ikshate Yoga Yuktatma, Sarvatra Samadarshanaha. This is the verse which is given in Bhagavad Gita. And we see Kaivalya Upanishad, the first line is the same. So who is taken from where, from whom? Bhagwan Krishna has taken that first line of the 29th verse of the 6th chapter from Kaivalya Upanishad. Upanishad is the Shruti. Bhagavad Gita is Smriti. So Bhagavad Gita has lot of Vedantic statements taken from various Upanishads. So he says here, the first line is the same. Sarva Bhutastham Atmanam. That Atma or the consciousness, Sarva Bhutastham. One consciousness, Kshetrajnaha, called as Kshetrajnaha in the 13th chapter, Sarva Bhutastham. In all the upadhis, in the upadhis of all the jivas, this consciousness is present. That consciousness which is present in all the upadhis, Sarva Bhutastham Atmatam, Sarva Bhutani cha Atmani. This consciousness is everywhere, inside the upadhi also, outside the upadhi also. Consciousness is everywhere, and all the bodies, all the bhutas, all the living beings, everything, the whole universe is in the Atma. Like we say, there is space in this house. Actually, the house is in the space. It's not that the space is in the house. The house is in the space. So initially, in the first, step of teaching of Vedanta, the teaching is you are a combination of two things. One is the anatma, body, mind, sense complex, and the consciousness, which is the content of this upadhi called as the atma. In the second step, it says, it is the same atma which is behind all the upadhis. And finally, Vedanta teaching is that this consciousness is inside and outside, antar bahischa. It's everywhere, and therefore, everything is in this consciousness. Therefore, the consciousness is inside me, outside me. So, where am I? I am in consciousness. Consciousness is in me, yes, no doubt. But I am that consciousness. And therefore, this entire body mind sense complex is steeped in this consciousness. That is the ultimate teaching. So he says here, Sarva Bhutastam Atmanam. Bhutastam, Sarva Bhutastam, that light of consciousness which is present in all the jivas. Sarva Bhutani cha Atmani. At the same time, all the upadhis are in this consciousness Atma. Sampashan, okay, Sampashan, who? This yati or this contemplator, Sampashan, clearly seeing. There it is said, Ikshate Yoga Yuktatma, the one who's in the Jnana Yoga, in the in the process of contemplation or nididhyasana, Ikshate, sees, Sarvatra Samadarshanaha, sees the same consciousness everywhere. Here, Sampashan means what? Having that Sarvatra Samadarshana, seeing that Atma, seeing this light of consciousness, one light of consciousness, Ekameva Advitiya Atma, within the body mind sense complex and also outside. In fact, he sees all the body mind sense complexes, the entire name and form universe in himself. I see it in me, the Atma. And then what happens? Yati, such a person. Who is this? Yoga Yuktatma, the contemplator. Yati. Yati means what? Yati means he goes. Yati means he becomes one with. But there's nothing like that. We have to use the word. He's already that Atma. We are all that Atma Swarupa. We don't lack the Atma Anubhava, but we don't know that we are that. This consciousness I am as Brahmanati, we don't have that knowledge. That is our ignorance. We don't lack the very experience that Ahamasmi iti experience nobody has not experienced. Brahma Anubhava is all the time there. So, Yati, this person attains or sees, okay, Paramam Brahma. He attains that Paramam Brahma, means he abides in his Atmaswarupam, Paramam Brahma. Na anyena hetuna, no other cause can make me abide in my Swarupam other than this knowledge. What knowledge? Sarva bhutastam atmanam, sarva bhutani cha atmani sampashyan yoga yukta atma. Sampashyan. Seeing this, seeing means what? Understanding. Understanding it very clearly that I am the consciousness in all the millions of upadhis. I am the consciousness behind all the jada upadhis in the jagat. In fact, all the living and non-living beings are in me, the Atma, in me, the consciousness. Difficult to accept it, but that is the truth. That is why we need Shravanam, Mananam, and Niridhyasanam continuously. It's not a short process like, 15 years of, like I do my graduation and post graduation, and no, it's a constant learning. It's a constant contemplation. And this is the only knowledge. This is this vision alone. Sampashyan. Sampashyan means samyak darshanam. We see that samyak darshanam. Samyak darshanam means what? A very clear understanding without any kind of a doubt. A very, very clear understanding that there is nothing other than this Atma. Everything else is Nama Rupa Upadhi. And I am that Atma without a second. There is nothing other than me. Everything is in me, comes in me, exists in me, and goes back, resolves in me. This knowledge is called as Samyak Darshanam. Sampashyan means Samyak Darshanam, the clarity of vision. What vision? This is the vision, Vedantic vision. When Vedanta says you are that consciousness not only behind your body, mind, sense complex, you are that Sarva Bhutastham Atma. And you are that consciousness in which all the names and forms and upadhis are there. This is the clarity of vision. This is the Vedantic vision. Unless I have this vision, there's no question of getting out of this samsara. Even if I make a little difference, I am different from you. I am an individual. My consciousness is different, yours is different. If I make that differentiation, then there is no question of getting out of my bondage. So, yati paramam brahma, na anyena hetuna, no other reason, no other cause. This samyak darshanam, this clear understanding is the only way in which I can abide in this Brahman. With this, the Nididhyasanam portion, which was taken up first, by Lord Brahma. Please never forget that Kaivalya Upanishad is a dialogue between Pitamaha Brahma and Ashvalayana Rishi. Let's not forget that. And through Ashvalayana Rishi, we are all the beneficiaries of this knowledge. We are the beneficiaries of this knowledge. Now, Bhagwan Brahmaji goes to the other, things about in Jnana Yoga. That is the Shravanam and Mananam, especially the inquiry. Nididhyasanam is contemplation. We already saw that. But then, before Nididhyasanam, we have to do the process of inquiry in the form of Shravanam and Mananam. And what is that inquiry? That is what is being talked about here in the 11th verse. With an imagery. With a very beautiful imagery, it is given here. First, I'll read the verse. Then I'll tell you what it means and why these particular terms are used here. Atmanam aranim kritva pranavanchottaranim ज्ञाननिर्बथनाभ्यासात् पाशं दहति पंडितः. So this is Atmanam Aranim Kritva Pranavancha Uttararanim Jnana Nirmathana Abhyasat Pasham Dahati Panditaha. Okay, so the process of inquiry. Unless we do the process of inquiry in the form of Shravanam and Mananam, there's no question of doing Nididhyasanam. But in this Upanishad, from this 5th verse up till the 10th verse, the Nididhyasana process was talked about. And now the Upanishad talks about the inquiry process in the form of Shravanam and Mananam. Let us see why he's saying that and what is the background of this. Arani, here, there is a word called Atmanam Aranim Kritva Pranavancha Uttara Aranim Uttararani. Arani means a dry twig, a dry piece of wood called as a twig, a dry twig. And earlier, to light the fire for any of these yagas and yajnas, they had to kindle the fire through this process of Arani Mathanam. So, what is the meaning of this? In Arani Mathanam, what you have is a lower twig with a kind of a depression in it, like a small hole in it. Then you have another piece of dry wood which is introduced into that depression there and then churned. They used to have something in the middle also, like you have this buttermilk churning like that. So with another piece in the middle you could churn, or with the hand you churn. And what happens when you're churning this, the top twig which is vertical and which is into that depression and churned, the top twig is called as Uttara Arani. And the twig which is lying on the ground, is called as the Adho Arani. So there are two Aranis, two dry, twigs of wood. And when you churn the Uttara Arani, in that particular depression in the Adho Arani, because of the friction, fire sparks would come. And any inflammable material like a cotton or something would be held near it so that it catches fire, and that fire was used to to kindle the fire in the Homakunda. In the Homakunda, that is how the fire was kindled. Even now it is done like that. I have seen in the certain wherever I have seen certain yagas being done, they do it with Arani Mathanam, because in the wood there is this principle of Agni. Principle of Agni is there in the wood. It is hidden. It is not seen, but it is hidden. And when you are, trying to, have friction between two dried woods, that is how forest fires also come, isn't it? Because of, the heat and because of the dry weather and the wind and because of the friction between the dried trees and their branches, sometimes the forest fires start. Maybe there are other external causes also, like people throwing out all kinds of burning things and all. That's not, but that was done earlier. And this mathanam used to give out the fire. Mathanam means, what you call as the, churning. Churning is called as the mathanam. So there are two things here. The Adho Arani, the Uttara Arani, the fire that comes, and the process of mathanam. Four things are there. So in Vedantic inquiry, each of them has a significance. Okay. Adho Arani is taken as one's intellect. One's intellect which is prepared for this knowledge. Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampanna intellect. An intellect which is purified by Karma Yoga. An intellect which is, made that chanchalatvam, naischalyam, chitta naischalyam by upasana yoga. Prepared intellect of a mumukshu. And then going to the teacher for this knowledge. And Vedanta Vichara. Vedanta Vichara is in the form of the churning. Vedanta Vakyas, the Guru and the Vedanta Vakyas. Guru Mukhena Shastra Shravanam is the Uttara Arani. So Guru Mukhena Shastra Shravanam, the Shastra, and this process of churning, which is the inquiry, because churning has to go on in my mind all the time. That churning process is what is called as Jnana Nirmathanam. And when I do enough of inquiry, what happens? The fire of knowledge is produced. And that fire of knowledge burns what? My ignorance. It completely burns away my ignorance. So, this is the principle on which this particular verse is, the 11th verse is based. So, let us see now. Atmanam aranim kritva. Atmanam means this intellect, where the knowledge has to take place. It is compared here to the lower arani. That is a horizontal piece of the wood which is kept there, in which, in that well, a small well-like thing is there, in which the mathanam goes on. Okay? Aranim kritva pranavancha uttararanim. Uttara arani, the churner, the churning rod, pranavam. Pranavam actually is omkara. You know, pranava means omkara. Now, pranava can be taken in two ways. Vedantic teaching, Vedanta Shastra can be taken as pranava, or omkara vichara. We have seen that in Kathopanishad. Omkara vichara itself. Because I have also told you that there are some Upanishads who talk about avasthatraya viveka, taking omkara as the alambadam. Okay, so like for example, Mandukya Upanishad. Mandukya Upanishad talks about omkara vichara, where the u and ma, u and of omkara represent the Jagrit Avastha, the Swapna Avastha, and the Sushupti Avastha. And the Amatra, the silence after Om, Om, Om. After one Om and between the next one, there is a silent matra. So, Om is described with 4 matras, and the same thing is taught as avasthatraya, jagrat, swapna, sushupti, and that consciousness behind all the three, turiya atma. So, omkara vichara is this, taking omkara and talking about Brahman or Atma with the avasthatraya viveka. That is also omkara vichara. And pranava also can be taken in general as Vedantic teaching also. So what is my Uttara Arani? That rod which is ultimately churned, that is Vedantic teaching. The teachings of Vedanta. Guru Mukhena, of course, no independent learning. Guru Mukhena. Vedanta Shravanam. And then what do? I do Vichara on that. That Shravanam which I have heard, Vichara I do on that. Vichara means what? Listening again and again, bringing out the other references which the Guru has given, asking the relevant questions, making an inquiry. It is the process that is going on in my mind, which is nothing but the process of knowledge in the form of Jnana Nirmathana, churning my intellect. I churn my intellect. In my intellect, this Vedanta Vichara is going on. Vichara is churning. I see all the pros and cons. I bring out all the references. If I see any contradictions in various Upanishads, I ask why this is so. Why am I seeing there are two different ways why the two Upanishads have explained? All these things is called as the vichara or the enquiry. Enquiry process is compared to a churning, where my intellect is churned to produce clear knowledge. And jnanagnihi, what this jnanagni does? It burns away, bhasmasat kurute, sarva karmanam. Sarva karmani bhasmasat kurut. All the karmas, my sanchita karmas, are gone. Why? Because this fire of knowledge, light of knowledge, destroys my ignorance. What ignorance? Who am I? I don't know. What is the world? I don't know. What is Ishvara? I don't know. That is my basic ignorance with which I have come. And what does this Vedanta Vichara do? It destroys that basic ignorance. What is it called? Mula avidya. When this ignorance is gone, then that knowledge which arises out of this inquiry is Aham Brahmasmi. Okay? And I abide in this knowledge, and all my ignorance is gone, all my samsara is gone. So he says, Jnana Nirmathana Abhyasat. Abhyasa it is. Vedantic inquiry is an abhyasa of life's time. It's not 1 year or 2 years. It's not a course like where up to 10 years you're in the school, then you're 5 years in your. It's not like that. It is something which has to go on till I know. How much time it takes? It depends on the individual intellect, how much prepared it is, how much sadhana it has done in its previous lives. It depends on all of that. And therefore, jnana nirmatana abhyasat panditaha pasham dahati. This pandita means what? Jnani. Panda yasya asti iti panditaha. Panda means atmajnanam. That which this panda or atmajnanam, the one who has it, such a person is called as a pandita. Pasham dahati pandita. Through this process of inquiry, making the teachings of Vedanta absolutely doubtless, Shravanam and Mananam are the processes of inquiry. And when this knowledge becomes steady, without any, doubts, then this Nididhyasanam, which was talked about from the 5th verse to the 10th verse, helps me in assimilating this knowledge. What is the meaning of assimilating this knowledge? All my viparita bhavanas are gone. All my wrong ideas about myself and Ishvara and Jagat are gone. And then what happens? I'm abiding in my Atmaswarupa. Forever free from all the pashas. Pasham dahati. What are the pashas for me? It is the karma phala. Sanchita karma, which has come in the form of prarabdha karma now. Prarabdha is a pasha. It's a bondage. Pasha means it's a bondage. Papa is a bondage. Punya is also a bondage, a golden bondage. Because for punya also, to work out punya, I have to come back again. So punya is also a pasha. Dukha is also a pasha. Papa is a pasha. As long as I don't know who I am, this pasha remains. So the one, a panditaha, means an intelligent person, a mumukshu, a jnani. What has he done? This jnani, now he has become a jnani, but as a mumukshu, what does he do? He does inquiry, and this inquiry, Vedantic inquiry in the form of Shravanam and Mananam, is talked about in the 11th verse as Arani Mathanam, the churning process, where the individual intellect is taken as the Adhovarani, the Vedantic teaching is taken as the Uttara Arani. The process of inquiry is this churning process, and the fire sparks born out of this friction or nirmathanam is what is called as mathanam or nirjnana mathanam. What I am getting is the fire or the light or sparks of knowledge. So this is talking about the enquiry, Vedantic, and without doing enquiry, we can't go into Nididhyasana. Okay, but sometimes what happens is some of the Upanishads may give you one thing earlier, they may not go in that particular order. So here, Pranavam cha Uttararani means, remember, you don't have to go into details. Pranava means generally also it represents Vedantic teaching in the form of Aham Satyam Jaganmithya Jivo Brahmaiva Napara iti. The Vedantic teaching can be taken as Pranava, or the Vedanta Vichara of Avasthatraya Sakshi, taking Omkara for Vichara, Omkara Vichara, like it is done in some of the Upanishads. That also, these two meanings can be taken for Pranavancha Uttararanim. So this is the meaning of that particular, verse which you saw just now, 11th verse. Now, next, the Upanishad wants to talk about, because it talked about Pranava, it talked about this avasthatraya vichara. So, very briefly, the Upanishad next wants to talk about avasthatraya viveka. We have already talked about it. Avasthatraya means what? The jiva or the mind goes through three mutually exclusive states throughout the life of the jiva in the form of a Jagrit jiva, Swapna jiva, and a Sushupta jiva. But there is this consciousness, Atma, Aham, Sakshi Chaitanya Atma, which is constant behind the Jagrat jiva also, behind the Swapna jiva also, behind the Sushupta jiva also. The same consciousness with the Jagrat Upadhi is called as Jagrat Avastha. And the name given for this Jagrat Jiva is Vishwa. You remember that? We have done it in Vivek Chudamani also. The same Atma consciousness, Sakshi Chaitanya Atma, with the Swapna Upadhi is called as a Swapna Jiva or Taijasa. The same Atma, never changing, which is behind the Sushupta Jiva with the Sushupti Upadhi of Avidya or Maya, is called as the Sushupta Jiva. The Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti avasthas change, but the consciousness behind all the three is one and the same. It is one unchanging consciousness in which mutually changing three avasthas are taking place. Therefore, these three avasthas are not the avasthas of Atma. These are the avasthas of the intellect or the avasthas of the mind or the jiva. It is the mind, it is the upadhi that goes through the avasthatraya. But who am I? Avasthatraya Sakshi. That is what is the main teaching in the Mandukya Upanishad, where Omkara is taken for the Vichara. Where the is of Om of the three is represented by the Jagrat Jiva or the Vishwa and the Jagrat Prapancha Virat, and the Swapna Ukara is explained as the Swapna Jiva and in the Samashti as Hiranyagarbha, and the Sushupta Jiva and as the Prajna and Ishvara as the Samashti. So this whole thing is explained in that way there. So here, because Pranavancha Uttararanim was taken in the previous this one, and how the Pashas, Pasham Dahati Panditaha, to have a Sangati, to have a connection between the previous verse for these 2 points. The next 2 verses, the Upanishad talks about Jagrat Avastha, Swapna Avastha, Sushupti Avastha, which belong to the Jiva, which belong to the Upadhi. And who am I? I am the Avasthatraya Sakshi Atma. I am the very same consciousness principle who's aware that I am awake now. I am the same consciousness which is aware that I, the waker, went to sleep and dreamt this particular thing. And when I wake up, I say, I had a very good sleep. I was so happy and I didn't know anything. I forgot all my problems. And I'm feeling so refreshed after a sleep. Who's saying that? It is one continuous consciousness which is behind all these, one thread, the same thread of consciousness. Because of which I see myself as the same jiva who had the Jagrat Avastha, the same waker slept and dreamt and went into deep sleep, and the same jiva is back now again as a waker. It is because of this unchanging thread of consciousness, which we call as Turiyam, Avasthatraya Sakshi, Turiya Atma Ahamasmi. So now, if this consciousness is something which is the content of all the upadhis, then who is the experiencer? What is it that is experiencing the Jagrat Prapancha? What is it that is experiencing the Swapna Prapancha? Who is it? Who is the one who is experiencing this Jagrat Avastha as a waker, Swapna Avastha as a dreamer, Sushupti Avastha had no experiencer, no experience. So how is it that this consciousness, this one consciousness, never changing consciousness, how is it manifesting itself in the jiva who is the jiva who is the experiencer of all the three states, not the consciousness? Atma does not have any states. It is one continuous, one permanent thing. It is the upadhi, the jiva upadhi, which has the three states. Okay, that's why never say three states of consciousness. Never. Consciousness does not have any states. It is the upadhi which has got the three states. Therefore, the three states or avasthas belong to the jiva, and the consciousness is avasthatraya sakshi. It has no avasthas of its own. Okay? So he says here, let us read the 12th verse. Sayeva maya parimohitatma shariram masthaya karoti sarvam striyannapanadi vichitra bhogaihi sayeva jagrit paritripti meti. So what is this Jagrit Avastha? That is what is being talked about here. Sayeva Atma. This Atma which we talked about, that is what? Prashantam, Shantam, Aksharam. That same Atma, the light of consciousness, Maya Parimohitaha. That which along with Maya, along with Prakriti, Shariram Asthaya, manifesting itself in this body as the sthula upadhi, shariram asthaya, as the sthula sukshma, both are necessary, but here Jagrit Avastha is being talked about. So sthula shariram asthaya. Asthaya means having with the Maya, manifesting with this upadhi, sthula sharira upadhi, karoti sarvam. I become the karta. I become the bhokta. This body is acting. I'm speaking. I'm moving my hands. You are listening. So, what is it? Because of which this jada body is becoming sentient and capable of action. What is it? It is the Atma Chaitanyam, because of which the body mind sense complex, the sthula sukshma shariras become sentient, and they are able to respond or act in the world outside with the other upadhis, with the other names and forms, and become kartas. Become kartas. They do. And then they, at the same body mind sense complex, becomes the bhokta also. Bhokta means what? It becomes the experiencer also of all the action, karta and bhokta. What kind of a bhoga it is? Stri annapanadi vichitra bhogaihi. When you're interacting with other individuals, other human beings, other jivas, three here represent other jivas. Okay? Now, when we interact with another human being, I become the bhokta and the other human being becomes the bhogya vastu for me. I'm interacting. Then what happens? I become the bhogya and that person becomes the bhokta. So, stri here means my interrelationship, my interaction, transaction with other living beings. I become a karta and I become an experiencer, bhokta also. Annapanadi, I become the karta and also bhokta with respect to the non-living or insentient objects also, like food, drink. See, I interact with the world, with the living beings also, with non-living beings also, with the situations also, correct? Where I become the karta and I become the bhokta. I become the bhogya vastu for somebody. Somebody becomes the bhogya vastu for me when it is the interpersonal reaction. Correct? Fine. And with the world outside, with non living things like food and water and my response with other non living beings, I become a bhokta and a karta, and the world becomes the insentient non living beings become the bhogya vastu. Therefore, he says, this Atma, along with Maya, because of the influence of Maya, Maya parimohita Atma, Maya parimohita. Because of Maya's influence, I, the Sakshi Chaitanya Atma, literally become a jiva. I manifest with the body mind sense complex and then I am called a jiva. I am the Atma itself. But when I manifest through this body mind sense complex, I become Upadhi Sahita Atma, which is called as the Jiva. And as a Jiva, I become the Karta, I become the Bhokta, I go through Vichitra Bhogas with other living beings and with non living beings. Sayeva Jagrat Paritrupti Meti. And this is the transaction that I do with my Sthula Sharira, with the Sthula Prapancha, with the Sthula Prapancha and the other Sthula Shariras, and I become the experiencer Tripti Meti, Vichitra Bhogaihi Tripti Meti. By Vichitra Bhogas, by various experiences, with Vichitra experiences, I become satisfied or happy, or I become an experiencer, Tripti Meti. Where does it happen? Jagrat Pari, in the Jagrat Avastha. So the same I, the Atma, with the Jagrat Sthula Sharira Upadhi, becomes a Karta with respect to the Sthula Prapancha and becomes a Bhokta with respect to the Sthula Prapancha. And this bhoktritvam may give me tripti or a tripti or sukha or dukha or whatever it is. So, this is the first avastha, the avastha of the body, avastha of the body mind sense complex, the sharira, the jiva, not the atma. So, this is the first one he's saying. In the next verse, he talks about the swapna avastha and also the sushupti avastha, which we will take up in the next session. ॐ नन्दन्तु साधका सर्वे विनश्यन्तु विदूषकाः अवस्थाशाम्भवी मेस्तु प्रसन्नोऽस्तु गुरुः सदा सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ तत्सत्